In this demonstration, we'll be showing you how IMan can integrate Concur expenses with Sage 300. The way that the demonstration will be conducted is that we will be creating a simple expense within Concur Expense, running our integration to pull across those approved expenses through into Sage, then showing you the resulting transactions in Sage 300. As I work through the demonstration, I'll be explaining some of the key fields as I enter the expense transaction. So first of all, we'll be logging into Concur as the user who is submitting the expense claim. So I've created a new expense claim, and I'm going to add some entries onto the expense claim. So on this first expense claim, there are a couple of key fields to the way that the expense is integrated. The first one is the payment type. So within the integration with Concur Expense, we have the ability to either integrate expenses into the accounts payable module or into the general ledger module. In this demonstration, we'll be integrating with accounts payable for each out-of-pocket expense, which needs to be reimbursed back to the employee, i.e., cash paid expenses. What we will do is that we will group up all of those expenses on the expense claim which have been paid for using the employee's own money. And we will create a single invoice within Sage 300, where the vendor on the invoice is the employee who needs to be reimbursed first. So every employee who incurs out-of-pocket expenses will end up with a vendor in Sage 300. And once the invoice is in Sage 300, the employee can be reimbursed through accounts payable. The second key field here is the how we make up the general ledger code, which is passed through to the detail line on the invoice. The way that we have all integration configured is that we will be taking the GL code, which is assigned to the expense type. The airline fees here and will be pending with whatever is being entered into the cost center field here where I've entered 100. Now, typically the cost tracking fields are set up as drop-downs within Concur. But here we've just got a free text entry. And what will happen is that we will take the GL code, which is assigned to the expense type, and append the value, which is sitting in the cost center. Now, irrespective of where you've got these cost tracking fields defined, whether they only defined on the user level, whether they're captured down on the expense claim level, our integration is configurable so that we can pick up those different values to make up the full GL code that we're passing into Sage 300. So that could be a 2-segment code. It could be a 3-segment code. It could be up to 10 segments if that's what you're capturing. And we pick up the receipt image and we save and add another entry onto the expense claim. So we want to add in telephone and fax. And for this particular entry, we will mark the entry as company paid. So in a typical scenario, you're going to have a mixture of employee paid plus non-reimbursable expense, such as a company paid or a credit card paid expense. For anything which is non-reimbursable, and they may be credit cards, instead of posting those entries to the employee's vendor account, we will group up the transactions by payment type. It could be company paid in this particular instance, and we will post those entries to a separate vendor which is defined through our software. So we have a mapping for the different types of payment types, for the different types of non-reimbursable payment types, and then each payment type will get posted off to a different vendor within Sage 300. And finally, we'll just add in another expense onto this single expense claim. We will also mark this as being company paid, add the image, and then the cost center. Okay, so here we have an expense claim with 3 entries on it where we've got 1 cash paid and 2 company paid expenses. So I'm going to submit this expense claim and then I'm going to log in as someone who can approve the expense claim. So that's been submitted. So now I'm going to log out and log back in as someone who can approve the expense. So I approve the expense. And now I go over to the accounting review stage. I change this to approve, and at this point, we're able to integrate any approved expenses. So I'm going to switch over to IMan to run the integration, to pull these approved expense or expenses through and into Sage300. So go over to scheduling. I choose the Concur Sage300 expenses integration. Now, I'm going to leave the frequency set to now to run the integration on demand. You do have the ability to run this on a schedule basis, so it's totally up to you on how frequently you want to run the integration. Typically, most of our customers are running the integration on demand because that's just the nature of the way that expenses can be processed. But you do have the option to run this on a schedule as well. Let's set the frequency to now and press the green tick at the bottom. The integration will start and it will query Concur for any approved expenses and pull these through into Sage300 as accounts payable invoices. This process can take a moment or two. So that's completed successfully. So as I mentioned at the outset, we're integrating with accounts payable here. So we've actually generated 2 invoices because we had the 2 payment types on that single expense claim, and it's gone into batch 599 in company Sam Limited. So if I switch over to Sage300, I go into accounts payable because we are integrating with the accounts payable. Here we've got batch 599 Concur Expenses invoice batch. I double-click to open. Okay, so for this first entry within the batch, we've got the expense report description. A thing to note is that we can map almost any field within Concur through to any field within Sage300. Here we've got the expense claim name being mapped to the invoice description. We are using the Concur unique report ID assigned by Concur to the document number field. This is unique and it prevents any sort of duplication in the future. I have 2 lines, the telephone fax and the airline fees. We've got the GL code and we've got the cost center, which puts the value that was entered into that free text field. Again, typically that is set up with the Concur as a drop-down. You can see for this telephone and fax line, we've got some tax being taken out from the 134 pounds in this case. And for the second entry, at least here in the UK, because airline fees as non-reclaimable, we respect Concur's calculation of VAT or tax and the reclaimable amount, so that has no tax associated with it. This particular entry is for the company paid expenses, and this is for the non-reclaimable expenses. This particular vendor has been defined in the configuration of our software. If I move to the next entry is for my reimbursable expenses. So here the vendor number comes from the employee ID within Concur. We've got the same document number and we've just got the 1 line because that was just the single line which was marked as being cash paid, which is reimbursable back to myself. So from here, you would post the entries, and that concludes the expense integration with Sage300 and Concur Expense.